In Crossout, there are many different cabins of different rarities. Some good, some bad, some hot, and some not. But today, I'm going to be taking a look at one of the most known, most useful, and probably one of the best cabs in the entirety of Crossout, the Growl. Now, when dealing with cabins in this game, there's a balance that applies to every cabin for every rarity. A light cabin, a medium cabin, and a heavy cabin. Light cabins are usually really fast and have a high top speed, but have less power and a lower weight limit, meaning that they can't really be armored. Medium cabins are balanced, having average speed and weight limits, while heavy cabins are very high power and have really high weight limits and can be armored really well, but are extremely sluggish. In terms of the Growl is pretty much a light cab with less durability, which makes you more vulnerable, but a much lighter mass, which makes it lighter and more agile. It has pretty low tonnage and low power, but in exchange, it has really fast acceleration and a high top speed. So when it comes to building, the Growl might seem a lot less flexible due to the lower weight limit, but that's where it does the best. By design, the Growl is pretty narrower than nearly every single cabin in its rarity, except for the Wyvern. And naturally, the Growl only wants you to do one thing: go fast. The Growl's weight limit might be seen as a disadvantage, but ultimately, it's an advantage because just imagine you being a low level player that doesn't have a lot of structural parts to protect your cab or weapons with. This would be a problem for a lot of the other cabs in the Growl's rarity, which need more structural parts for more armor. But for the Growl, less is more. The Growl also encourages players to be a lot more mindful about your building. It's not like the Wyvern or the Trucker, which allows players to use a lot of medium and heavy structural parts anyway. The Growl requires you to know how to distribute structural parts around your car. Like, for say you'd want a strong bumper in the front, back, and at the sides to protect you from damage, and you'd also want a mix of various parts to keep the car durable whilst keeping it light and fast. But by far, one of the strongest building points of this is the amount of energy it has. The Trucker and the Wyvern have 9 and 10 energy, but the Growl has a whole 11. That might not seem like much to the average player, but 11 energy is really good. It gives you more space for weapons and hardware on the vehicle. For example, you can run 3 shotguns or machine guns and 2 radiators for longer firing speeds, 2 cannons and 1 reload booster, and the list goes on. And if you use a generator like the Big G, it can give you 1 more energy, making it 12, giving you even more flexibility with your weapons. Like now you can run dual turret cannons, 3 wasps, 3 auto cannons, and much more. But when you go out of the garage and onto the field, this car really begins to show its usefulness. Now, when you're in battle, the Growl is extremely effective solely due to a deciding factor: speed. As I said, the Growl wants you to go fast, and it sure will go fast. And as it's able to top out at a whopping 95 km an hour, its speed lets you do a lot of things. For one, it gives it a great positioning advantage, as at the start of matches, you can easily get to the optimal range of whichever weapon you run. And if an enemy is in a place you don't like, you can easily reposition yourself due to how fast you can move around. It also lets you help out your teammates, like say, if 1 or 2 of your teammates is isolated and is getting attacked, you can easily rush over and help him or her out. And if you're in an unfavorable position, like let's say right in front of the enemy, the Growl lets you escape easily. See, the Growl kind of reminds me of the Scout from Team Fortress 2 because of how essential movement and speed is to both. And the sheer speed of this cab leads to its second strength, which is its utility. An average amount of cabs of higher rarity in Crossout can only run a few couple of weapons due to perks, structures, etc. Like the Hadron is mostly meant for reload based weapons like cannons and more, due to its ability to reload, or the favorite cab, which has a perk that permanently removes the heating up of weapons for a short period of time and is meant for weapons like shotguns, machine guns, etc. Now, it's not like these 2 cabs can run any other weapon, but it wouldn't be good if they ran weapons that actively contradicted their perks, as it would make those cabs a lot weaker. The Growl doesn't have this problem. It's a cab that's at a much lower rarity than these cabs, so it doesn't really have any perks that cater to any specific weapons, meaning it can literally run anything. Machine guns? Sure. Shotguns? Alright. Cannons? They are heavy, sure, but it's possible. It's alright. It's fine. It's alright. It's fine. Autocannons, that's totally fine. This isn't just due to the fact that the Growl has no weapon specific perks, it's also due to its speed. Now just imagine having a machine gun trucker. You'd have a high amount of health, sure, but you'd barely be able to keep up with your targets if they're using a faster carbine due to their speed. And since you're so slow, you're going to be a big damage sponge, and machine guns don't usually have a lot of health, so a couple of hits to your weapons would make you practically useless. But if you are using the Growl, you'd be able to get to the optimal range of machine guns, which is medium or close distance, and absolutely spray on the enemy team. And because of your speed, you can easily avoid damage to yourself and your machine guns. The same thing goes for a lot of other guns like shotguns. All you need to do is just close the distance and know your positioning and just let the shotguns do the work. And even cannons, extremely heavy, longer distance weapons with lots of damage and long reload speeds, which would look like a bad match for the light and fast Growl and a better match for the trucker, work surprisingly well. As if you keep your distance, lead your shots, and use your speed to position yourself, you can get a lot of damage at a short note. That's it. That's actually it, okay? If I have to do a whole section about this thing, I will. Oh my god! Trucker borers are, what's the word? It's hard to describe something as bad, unskillful, and as annoying as this thing. See, the borer as a concept isn't a bad weapon. It's a melee weapon designed to be useful only when you're literally breathing next to the enemy. But in turn, for its rarity, it does tons of damage in a couple of seconds and has resistance to certain weapon types. Now, this is good because it punishes players for not positioning themselves properly and not being aware of their surroundings, and mostly because of this. Pair that with a trucker, a pretty slow carb but has a truckload of health, get what I'm saying? And you have something that shouldn't work at all, but works to the point of literally an unbalanced state. And what's worse is that you can find these things in low power score matches. You know, the matches where a lot of players don't know how to build and just have a smidge over 1,000 durability. Yeah, you have way more than they do, making you an annoying tank that shreds players in seconds. But now you might say,
well, truckers are really slow and borers are only good at close range, so shouldn't they be easy to counter?
Well, I agree, they should be and are relatively easy to counter. If you can put yourself away from the spikes and shoot at them or use things like drones, they are practically useless. But that brings up another problem, which is the skill level. 3000 power score is low for a reason, because it mostly has low level and low skilled players who probably just installed the game 2 days ago and don't know a lot about the game. And they most likely don't really know how to build much because they never watched any guides. So they won't know about how bumpers reduce melee damage or how to build around certain weapons and other tips. So they are pretty much easy pickings for melee trucks. And the second problem is that, come on, do you know how many of these are in the game? Like, dealing with one, no issue, but imagine a bunch of truckers with borers at the front just targeting you and only you. And it sucks a lot if your team is really bad. Like, these things plague lower power score brackets and are mostly only used by people who want a free kill. And what's worse is that they take nearly no skill to use. And by no skill, I literally mean barely any skill. Like, this is literally like pyro for crossout. Like, just to prove a point, I got a proper trucker borer and used it for the first time ever. And this is the result. I got 2nd place. And this is my first time of using it. See, this is what I mean by low skill. All you need to do while using these things is literally press W, A, S, and D to move around and the mouse to look around and nothing else. It's literally the definition of extremely low risk and extremely high reward. In higher power scores, it's a lot less since people actually have a brain and know how the game works. But in lower power score, borer truckers are just straight up annoying. The thing is though, as annoying as they sound and as annoying as they are, trucker borers are easy to beat. For one, if you know how to build, you can use things like bumpers to reduce the damage that a borer would potentially do to you to a certain degree. And bumpers are pretty easy to access at low PS, though at that PS, they aren't always the best. And being honest, trucker borers, if they ram into you, sometimes those bumpers just literally fall off and you're messed up and you can barely move. So yeah, but they're still a nice thing to have anyways. And 2 truckers, as I said, are pretty slow, so they can't really close the distance efficiently as possible. And if you know how to position yourself and stay with your team, trucker borers won't be much of a threat. Editor's note, okay, so at the time of this recording, it seems like they nerfed the borer to reduce its ramming damage, but being honest, trucker borers are still going to be a problem because it only affects fast builds, so take that as you will. Right, back to the Growl. As good as all this speed is, and believe me, it's really good, the Growl has some pretty strong downsides to counter its pretty strong upsides. The biggest and most noticeable downside is its durability, or lack thereof. Yes, the speed is really good in dodging projectiles, but when you fumble while playing against someone really good and actually knows how to aim, and you take damage, it hurts a lot when using this thing. And you have to keep in mind, you are basically made of paper, and your durability can go from normal to like 50 in mere seconds if you're not careful. And yes, it is possible to run heavy weapons like cannons on the Growl, and it actually works really well, but remember that they take up a lot of weight that could be used in durability or other things. So you need to build really smart or use engines for extra weight limits. And engines are really essential to the Growl as they help you to give you more space to build. And finally, how does the Growl compare to other carbines in its rarity? Well, to something like the Wyvern, it's only 15 km faster and has less weight limit, but a better energy count and higher acceleration than the Wyvern. Still though, the Wyvern is still a very solid medium carbine, and despite its slightly slower speed, I found the Wyvern to still be a pretty viable and quick carb and can position pretty well. It's also got the same narrow design as the Growl, which makes it easier to build. The only real problem is that at lower levels, the players can't really access the full weight limit of the Wyvern due to the lack of structural parts or good wheels to compensate, but it's still a totally viable carb to run over the Growl. To the trucker, it's way faster and has more energy as well, but keep in mind, the trucker has a lot more health than the Growl, and if paired with good weapons and a competent player, truckers can actually be a very good challenge. And due to the trucker's health, it can tank a lot of damage that you put out. But the trucker's only real problem is the same as the Wyvern's. Lower level players don't have a lot of wheels or structural parts to compensate, and keep in mind the weight limit of the trucker is really high. And finally, if we are comparing it to the Bear/Fury carb, they are practically the same thing. One of my favorite carbs in the game, I don't think there's really a challenge between the two because both are so good. The Bear may be less narrow and bigger than the Growl, but its weight limit is very good, especially considering that it's a medium carb, and the speed is also really good on wheeled builds. I also found it really effective on tank tracks for some reason due to its lower profile, and despite the immense weight of tank tracks, it worked really well. Also for the Fury, it might have a little bit less of a mass weight limit compared to the Growl or the Bear, but in turn, it's pretty quick and is still just as useful. And I'm sorry, but the downshift noise, that's way too good. Probably one of the best sounding cars in the game. And actually, the same goes for every rare carb. The balance I found between all the rare carbs is actually pretty good. Every rare carb is viable in any way, and they balance themselves out very well. As no carb has too much armor or too much speed. It's either a carb that's fast with less armor, a carb that's slow with more armor, or a balance between the two, basically making any carb a good matchup and completely useful in matches. So all in all, the Growl is a very good carb. It has very strong upsides balanced by very strong downsides, making it completely viable. And it's not in any way stronger or weaker than any of the other carbines mentioned because all are balanced so well. But to me, I think the Growl is one of the best carbs in crossout, and that's pretty much that. Anyways, this is Red Dynamite blowing off. I hope you enjoyed the video. Big thanks to Not Samji for the voice and a user in crossout. I think it was God Felix for helping me out for the trucker Bora part, and the entire crossout community for giving me good insight and information for this video. I have a lot of stuff planned out for you guys, so don't worry, it's all coming out soon. So I'll see you guys later. Bye bye.